When you're starting a new quilt pattern, I like to approach it a lot like I might a new recipe. So for me, that usually means taking some time to actually read through the whole of the pattern before I start. So the first thing we come to after the cover is your table of contents. It tells you where you're going to find your fabric requirements and cuts, then how to assemble it, how to finish your quilt. And then the bonus pattern here, usually on this free pattern, I didn't go as detailed as I might typically, but here is where you're going to find instructions, your fabric requirements and cuts for the throw and the bed option. I tend to like to include a little something like I have here about my pattern, maybe what inspired it, what it was maybe named for. That's just a fun little blip I like to include. Then when you come to tips, the first thing you see is to say that says read all the way through the directions before beginning. Again, this is really important. You may come upon a step that doesn't make sense, but if you keep reading, you see where that step is going to lead you towards it, and maybe it makes a little bit more sense. So I think thinking about it like a recipe is super helpful, because you're not typically going to look at like a recipe for making apple pie and just look at your first ingredient, but not look at the rest of the ingredients or what you're going to need to do with them. You're going to really like take your time to read through kind of the whole of it. And I think approaching a quilt pattern, especially because there's so many different ways of writing, I think that is super helpful as well. So here, as we do that, we can see our width of fabric assumes 42 inches. Most fabric is somewhere in that ballpark. Some, the selvage that I can show you when we do cuts, sometimes the selvage on some fabrics that we really love might be a little bit wider, and so your width could be a little bit shorter. So you're going to want to check that on your fabric. If you're working with fabrics you're not familiar with, you're going to want to make sure that the width of fabric that your fabric has is 42 inches. RST is an abbreviation I'll use that means right sides together. That just means the side that your print is on if it's a print, or sometimes even a woven might have a right side, not always, but some of them I'm even looking at off screen kind of have what feels more like a right side. My seam allowances are 1/4 of an inch. If you are coming over from sewing garments, that's a lot shorter. So one of the first mistakes I made was sewing with a 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch seam, and my quilt turned out a lot smaller than you might want. Generally, I have people press seams open, although in this pattern, as it says, unless otherwise noted, that is going to be something that we will do differently in this pattern. Then also I have a few other abbreviations that may pertain to this pattern and this pattern only. So FQ means fat quarter. That's just a standard way fabric can often be cut. So it's 18 inches by 21 inches. You see that 21 is half of that 42. 18 is half of a yard, which is 36 inches. So it's really like, half of a half yard is maybe one way of thinking of it. And then a jelly roll is a way fabric sometimes gets sold, and it comes with 40. My parentheses mean here how many of these 2.5 times 42 inch or width of fabric strips that would come in a package called a jelly roll. Okay, so those are the first tips that you might want to be familiar with. Next, we're going to come down to fabric requirements and cuts. So the original Maggie Pearl makes kind of like a roomy toddler size 40 inch by 56 inch. And over here, you're going to see we have things called light fabrics and dark fabrics, which we'll talk about more as we get into our fabrics next week. But you're going to see you need 7 fat quarters or quarter yard cuts, and then 7 fat quarters or quarter yard cuts of the dark fabrics. And from those, then you're going to do your cuts here. Now, if you have used fat quarters, you'll be cutting, you'll need a total of 40 2.5 times 21 inch cuts. I'll show you how to do that next week. If you're using a quarter of a yard, then you'll be getting width of fabric cuts, and you'll need half as many of those long strips because they're twice as long. And then the same for the dark fabrics. You can also see this asterisk here. You can also use a whole jelly roll of fabric to do this. If you are using a jelly roll, see over here, you're going to divide those fabrics evenly into a dark and light pile. And you'll complete step 1 just once. And then you're going to cut your light and dark strip fabrics and have to complete your step 2. So that's all coming down here, which we'll get to in a second. But this kind of tells you, okay, if you want to use a jelly roll, here's what you're going to need to do. If you're planning on using fat quarters, here's what you're going to do. And if you're using quarter yard cuts, here's what you're going to do. So see here that the light fabrics, you need 20 of them, and the dark fabrics, you need 20 of them. And remember, a jelly roll has 40 of them. So you will use an entire jelly roll to make this 40 by 56 inch toddler size quilt. Okay, then as I come down here, this is where I may start scanning a little bit, but I still want to take my time to read through so that I can understand. Now, a lot of this I'll go into much greater detail when we come to the week of actually sewing this together. But this, I just wanted to show you how I actually approach any new pattern. I'm going to come through and say, okay, for fat quarters, that's what I'm making. So I'm going to use these instructions here, but this says for jelly roller yardage, this is what I'll do. Then I see step 2, step 3, I see the visual over here, and then I'm kind of getting an idea of, okay, this is how you make the Maggie Pearl block. Then I come down, I see how I'm going to assemble the whole of the quilt, reading as I need to, and then this is how to finish the quilt. Okay, when I come down to the bonus pattern, I imagine a lot of us are going to want to be making the throw or the bed size, but I would check here and see, okay, is this the size that I want, or is this the size that I want? And then I would go through and see how many fat quarters or quarter yards that I'm going to need of what I'm calling lighter fabrics and what I'm calling darker fabrics. I'm actually going to write up a blog post about yardage if you just wanted to do yardage for your light fabrics. How many yards? I'll go ahead and tell you here. For the toddler up here, the original, if you, instead of wanting to do like a random selection of fat quarters, if you just wanted to do all cream for your light fabric, you're going to need 1.5 yards to get those 22.5 inch times width of fabric cuts. Okay, you'll need a 1.5 yards for the toddler. And then for your throw down here, if instead of your what I'm calling light fabrics here, if you wanted yardage and wanted to make all of this cream just the same color light fabric, you're going to need 3 yards to get your 80 2.5 inch times 21 inch cuts. And then for your bed, you would need 4.25 or 4.25 yards to get the 120 2.5 inch times 21 inch cuts. And actually, I'm sorry, this I should have said, and I really will write a blog post about this if you're switching to yardage, because that would also be 40 2.5 inch times 42 inch or 60 2.5 inch times 42 inch or width of fabric. Okay. You can also see here, using the same method as above in the toddler, you could also use 2 jelly rolls to make a throw size or 3 jelly rolls to make a bed size. Each of these rectangular blocks comes out to be 8 inch by 14 inches finished, or 8.5 inches by 14.5 inches unfinished. So just keep that in mind. If I've even been thinking about making a bed, but my bed is a bit bigger. So what if instead of 10 across and 6 down, I did 11 across and 7 down? How many blocks I would need? How big would that make it? If I did that, that would be 77 blocks, and that would make it 88 inches by 98 inches, which is a bit closer to a queen size bed. And that would mean I would need 13 fat quarters. Is that right? Yeah, I'll need to write up the blog post for that. I don't think that that's right. But anyways, you can easily add as needed there. Yeah, so a few of my kind of writing conventions that I like to do. I get a lot of questions about why is this number in parentheses. If you can see right here, if I just wrote 40 without anything kind of enclosing that number would really run into the 2.5 inch. And so as a way of separating that out, I like to use parentheses. Some people like to do a dash, like a hyphen. I think that the parentheses just really sets it off a little bit better. And that just means that's how many of the following measurement you need. So here, I would need 40 of the 2.5 inch times 21 inches. Or down here for binding, I would need 5 of the 2.5 inch times width of fabric. Let's see. The one final thing I'll say is on backing right here that you can see, it's going to be 48 inches times width of fabric. You get 2 of those. I always make sure I'm going to have enough extra that I could send it to a long armor, and that assumes 4 inches on all sides. So you're going to have extra on this because, you're just over with the fabric on that 40 inches. But in order to have enough extra on all sides, that's where that extra amount comes from. Okay, I think that probably covers for today what I need to give you. Like I said, we'll be going through more of the step-by-step instructions as we go. But this gives you an idea of just when you start with a new quilt or a new recipe or a new garment that you're wanting to make sure you take your time to read through all the way through all of the instructions, because a lot of times the answers are waiting for you a few steps down. So anyways, thanks for following along, and I'm excited to sew this Maggie Pearl with you.